All right, guys, we was gonna go out to the track today, but it's raining and we're closed. We were gonna work on the woods track, but the foam for the excavator broke. So we thought we'd come in here and do some work on the bikes. Got a lot of bikes that we've rode hard, put away wet. Time to do some maintenance on them. I've got a 2022 KTM coming here in a minute. We're going to revalve the front forks with some components from ProTune. We'll try to do a video on that later, but just a little quick overview of the shop we have here and the bikes that we all been running. We run mostly the older bikes. We got some 99s and some 2000s. We got a 2019 here in the stall. Cameron's got him a 250, 300, 380s. Got lots of different CCs here. What year is the 500?
95.
Cameron's got a 95.
I just put new
500.
countershaft seal in.
Just replaced the countershaft seal in it. It's probably the best looking bike in here right now, but got it all set up for woods right now, but I think he's going to turn it back into a motocross machine. And he's trying to work with Owen and Hunter on doing a little bit of maintenance on the TTR over here.
Yeah,
but,
Owen's TTR.
We got a space open right here for the KTM that's coming in for some fork revalving in a minute. But I'll try to do a video on that here in a minute. All right, we got Nick's 2022 KTM 300 TPI
XCW.
in here. It's the XCW.
XCW, yep.
Yeah. Over here. Basically got a care package from Corey ProTune. We got the 40 Explorer fork off the 2022, and this is the left-hand side with the pressure adjuster at the top. These are just, you know, open chamber forks, but we're going to drain the fluid from them. We're going to work on the mid valve. Corey sent us a new base valve. All right, we knocked the base valve out. We're going to be replacing that base valve and the valving on it. Got the whole cartridge out here. Won't be doing fork seals today because this bike's got 20 hours on it. So 10 hours. Just tearing it apart to do a revalve, work on the mid valve. Next thing we're going to do is tear into this mid valve. So, as you know, on these WPs, there's not really a mid valve here. A lot of different words out there for it, but we're actually going to put a mid valve on here. It's just more of a damper, really. But we're going to take the original WP parts and put the same parts on this side that would be in the other side and add valving to it. All right, here we go. We got the damper assembly out of the WP fork. We got the performance kit from ProTune. You can see basically it's just the mid valve, just like the other side. He does have a little bit different valving that he recommends in the other mid valve. We're going to have to take a look at that. I got it in an email. And he sends you gold valves for the base valve for the compression side with all new shim stacks. So not a real expensive kit for whatever you get. If you go out there and source all these parts yourself, Corey really gives you a good deal on these guys. You're not paying for the valve, you're paying for his expertise. And I highly recommend this if you want to do your own forks. And you can see he's got compression set up, but he's just got a lift on the Rebound. So he's added some compression here, it looks like. I haven't torn these 2022s yet, but usually on the other side, the Rebound has shims and there's a lift on the other. I think there's some valving there as well with a float. But we'll tear into it and see if it's the same as the 2019 here in a minute. Still working on the left side, the one with the compression adjuster, and Corey sent us a new base valve and shim stack for it. Got my Allen wrench laced in my vise. I'm going to take the stock valve off. Gotta be careful when you put this back together because this is a check valve on this side. You want to make sure you don't tighten down this nut on your floating valve. I'll show you what it looks like. It actually floats on the shaft of the outside of your nut. Okay, so it's just like any other float in the fork. It's going to float on this. If you have it off to the side when you tighten it down, this rim will hit it. So this is your check valve coming off here. You can see the pocket that the nut is going to go down into, the collar of the nut. Okay, I like to lay everything out. This valve don't have a hole in the center, but if there's a hole in the center, you can put your pick in there and keep everything lined up. In case we ever want to go back to stock, but I'll probably be recycling those shims, use them for other projects. So we got our shim stack here and our valve. Trying to keep the shim stack in place that he's got set up there. Slip that on the base valve. Okay. Let's put our check plate on. A little squirt of suspension clean both our sides. Always nice working on totally new forks. Not a bunch of dirt in there to clean up, which usually takes most of the time. Here again, when we tighten this down, we've got to make sure the collar of our check plate, our check plate nut, goes around that. So as we tighten it down, we want to make sure that that don't crimp the check plate. Put a little bit of blue Loctite on him. Make sure our spring goes up into the collar nut. Tighten it down. Eventually you're going to hit the valve, and you know your collar can't go on top of your check plate. Make sure everything's free there. Keep going down with our nut. We'll move over here. Make sure your check plate's free. And double check your shims, make sure them are out of shape, but chances are that none of them should be unless someone put a shim with the wrong inner diameter on there. And the base valve's ready to be put back in. Feels all right. Got our base valve in. Start it with your fingers. Make sure. We're going to give him a couple little quick uggas with the torque. I'm going to put it on as low as it'll go. Okay, now this will really only go to about 30 on that low setting. I'm going to torque it down to 35 Newton meters. All right. Okay. All right, so this guy here is ready to put fork fluid back in. We're going to go with 130 millimeters to start with the tubes dumped. I like to use the Race Tech fork oil level setter. Got it set to 130. Okay, we got the recommended spring rate from ProTune. We'll drop those guys in there, put this one back on the bike, and then we're going to do the right hand side, the one with the Rebound adjustment on it. We got the side off now that's on the right side that usually has the Rebound adjuster on it. And this does have a mid valve in it, as we all are accustomed to seeing. So we're going to loosen this. We're going to drain our oil. Being an open cartridge, it's usually pretty easy to drain from here. If you ever need to change your springs, this is how you change your springs. You can do it while it's in the bike. You do both sides at one time. Loosen your fork caps both at the same time. Push it up. Then you can release your fork cap from your cartridge assembly. The kitty litter bucket here, that's a essential fork repair tool. I'm going to compress the spring down. Here again, there's going to be a spot where it gets a little snug right there. Little bump. I'll probably just leave all this part out. All right, got my fork cap separated. We'll pull our adjustment rod out. Spring off. Bottom washer. There are no adjusters on these Explorer forks for the base valve. Give them a couple of bumps with the impact. All we need is a couple little bumps. If it don't come loose from that, you're going to have to probably apply a little bit of heat, but most of these Explorers, I've not found any Loctite or anything like that on them. Yes, and there's a big debate online. Should you use an impact? Should you not? But being, even the tools you get down in there to hold these rods, if you don't get that nice little bump from the impact, still sometimes ends up chewing things up more than if you would just get out the impact wrench and just give it a couple little bumps. Got our base valve out. We should be able to pull our whole cartridge assembly out of here. There is an O-ring you have to bring past these threads. I'm going to pull it across those threads smoothly. I usually twist it a little bit as I go, so it doesn't put a whole lot of force on them. And you can see the O-ring in there we got to take care of when we put this on and off these threads. Our mid valve and the rod will come out the bottom. We're going to take this part, we're going to clean it up. All right, we got the mid valve tore apart, got the rebound side and the compression side. I'm going to reorganize this into what ProTune suggested and then stick that back together. Putting the mid valve back together, we're going to start with the compression side. So we're going to start with the shim that goes down against the spring. And try to hold them down over the float collar as I build it so it's not such a pain to get together. I like to lay them out and measure them and then put them on one at a time, especially with these floats. It looks like he's got float and a little bit of a bleed going on here. With the piston, you can always look at the size to tell which is compression, which is rebound, but you also have a little indent where the collar has to go. That's a good indicator, and that should go down in there. Rinse that off just a little bit more. And then we're going to build our rebound stack. Now, the rebound stack does start with deltas. You can just put them on there willy-nilly at first, but whenever you get ready to tighten everything down, you've got to make sure that the delta ears line up with the piston just right. Deltas line up, and then they line up with the piston. You don't want it like this. You don't want them all misaligned either. They should be all in aligned with themselves, and they should be over top the piston. So we got our deltas. We're on the rebound side again. Looks like he's got a crossover going here, and then fairly traditional looking shim stack. Again, they did peen the end of this, but you can tell it's not much because the shims go right on. There's not much of a swell there at all. Clamping on there, blue Loctite. Nut on there. Pretty easy. It's hard to show on the camera, but your deltas should cover up the piston ports. They want to leave as much volume here as they can. That's why they have those deltas there for the compression stroke as the fluid goes through. Putting the mid valve back in the cartridge. Our spring separator on there. And there's an O-ring in there. I like to sort of thread it in there easily, make sure nothing's getting bound up. Just comes down and threads onto the top. Again, don't have to be real tight. Okay. We'll start it in by hand. If this gets too cumbersome with two hands, you can always go to the vise, but usually if things in good shape, you can pretty much thread this in by hand. We're not going to actually tighten it up with this. We're going to go to the torque wrench in a minute, but sometimes this will get you started so that your rod don't spin. So now we're going to take it up to 35. Okay, now we're ready to add our fork plug. Not sure we'll film this part